There is a path that isn't for the weak-hearted. It's the path walked by empaths. Since childhood, they've carried something rare inside them, a pure inner glow, an innocent energy that makes the people around them feel safe, seen, and truly valued. And yet that same glow ends up acting like a mirror, exposing the hollowness, the lies, and the darkness hiding inside a narcissist. Rather than being cherished, empaths often become the target of jealousy, cruelty, and calculated cruelty. But here's the remarkable part. They refuse to give up on their own growth. Empaths discover how to remain steady even when darkness presses in. They don't take the easier road of dishonesty, manipulation, or giving up their values. Instead, they choose to walk in truth, faith, kindness, and quiet strength. And it's exactly this path, with all its heartbreak, its tests, and its moments of clarity, that turns them into the one thing a narcissist fears most: someone who sees straight through the act and can no longer be manipulated. In today's video, we're going to walk through the 4 stages of life that every empath who has survived narcissistic abuse eventually goes through. These aren't just simple lessons, they're keys to protecting your peace, uncovering the real power behind empathy, and stepping fully into freedom. Stick around until the end, because the second stage is the hardest one to face. Yet it's also exactly where the chance to become unshakable begins. And if this is the first time you're watching, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the healing, meaningful, and empowering videos we put out. Let's take this journey together so that every step forward moves you out of the shadows and into the light of freedom and renewal. Stage 1 is the light you were born with, a gift that comes with its own set of challenges. There's something a lot of empaths never fully realize. From the very beginning of life, they carry a different kind of light inside them. It's not flashy or attention-seeking, it's more like a quiet warmth, an energy that makes anyone nearby feel safe, understood, and seen. This isn't something they trained for, it's simply who they are. Empaths don't have to work hard to impress anyone, and they don't need to scheme to be noticed. Their genuine, unforced presence is enough on its own for people to sense their worth. In childhood, this often shows up as an unusual sensitivity to other people's pain. An empathic kid might tear up watching a classmate get scolded or gently console someone the moment they sense sadness behind a parent's smile. What gets mistaken for weakness is actually a rare gift, the ability to genuinely feel what others are going through. This is where the light begins, a gift not everyone receives. But here's the irony: not everyone welcomes that light. Kind, good-hearted people feel calm the moment they're near you. They trust you almost instantly because on some level they recognize honesty without any disguise. But for people carrying a lot of darkness inside, your light works differently. It becomes a mirror that reflects back everything they're missing. Think back to your school days. Maybe you were picked on by a bully for no real reason at all. You hadn't done anything wrong, but just being yourself was enough to bother them. Or maybe in your own family, a relative kept picking you apart, making you feel like you were never quite enough. At work, perhaps you tried to act with integrity, only to unknowingly become a threat to people who thrive on dishonesty. Why does this happen? Because your honesty and your purity expose the cracks in their own facade. Most empaths don't see this pattern clearly. They keep asking themselves, why do I always attract the wrong people? Why am I the one who gets targeted? But here's the truth. Your light is both a blessing and a battle. It pulls in 2 very different kinds of people, those who are drawn toward its warmth and those who are frightened by the truth it forces them to see about themselves. For a narcissist, this is almost unbearable. In the beginning of a relationship, they might seem completely captivated by your light. To them, you're a rare source of energy, someone they can quietly feed off of to fill the emptiness they carry. They'll shower you with compliments, put you on a pedestal, and make you feel like you've finally found someone who truly values sincerity. But slowly, that same light starts to feel threatening to them. The closer they get to you, the harder it becomes to ignore the fact that they don't have what you have, that they chose deceit, control, and manipulation instead. At this point, empaths often feel torn and confused. Part of them recognizes they have a real ability to touch people deeply and help them heal. But another part of them is wounded by the jealousy, resentment, and even hostility they keep running into. It's easy to start questioning yourself here. Am I too sensitive? Did I somehow cause this? But the truth is simple. None of this is your fault. It's just how light naturally behaves, and light will always disturb the darkness around it. The important thing to understand is this: your light was never meant to be hidden away. So many empaths, after being hurt one too many times, start shrinking themselves. They hold back their kindness, suppress their honesty, or try to blend in so they don't stand out anymore. But that's not the solution. Light can't truly be put out. It can only be buried. And when it gets buried, the empath ends up feeling cut off from their own true self. This first stage is a quiet, hidden test. Can you accept that your light is both a gift and, in some sense, a call to stand your ground? Are you willing to keep living authentically, even knowing it might stir up envy or resistance? A mature empath is someone who learns to keep that light burning while also protecting it with healthy boundaries. You could say this first stage is the foundation for everything that follows. If you don't understand what your light is really doing, you might keep blaming yourself for wounds that were never your fault to begin with. But once you wake up to this truth, you'll see it clearly. Your light proves you were meant to be different, to challenge what's wrong, and to stand as living proof that kindness is never a weakness. It's actually a sacred kind of strength. And this awareness is what prepares you for the second stage, the toughest trial of all, when the narcissist tries not just to dim your light, but to break your very spirit. Still, before stepping into that painful chapter, remember this: that light belongs to you. No one can take it away. And it's the very foundation that will one day make you unbreakable. Stage 2 is spiritual starvation, and it's the harshest test of all. If the first stage is where the empath's light shines and unintentionally stirs up envy, the second stage is where darkness comes at them with everything it has. This is when the narcissist finally starts showing their true colors. Once they've already won your trust, your love, and your devotion, they shift away from the charming, idealizing version of themselves and move into a phase of destruction and manipulation. And the hardest part is this: their attacks aren't aimed at the surface. They go straight for the soul. During this stage, empaths often fall into what can only be described as a kind of spiritual starvation. They love fully, give freely, and sacrifice with complete sincerity, hoping for safety and real companionship in return. But instead, what they get is cold silence, quiet punishment, and sharp words aimed straight at their most tender places. So even with all their capacity to love, empaths find themselves stranded in an emotional desert, and the thirst for real love becomes their deepest source of pain. Then comes the mask switch. At first, the narcissist plays the role of the perfect partner, warm, intense, deeply passionate. Empaths who carry old wounds often mistake this intensity for real love. They finally believe they've found something deep and safe, but in truth, it's nothing more than a carefully built disguise. Once the narcissist feels they've fully secured you, that mask comes off. Sweet words turn into criticism, affection turns into control, and admiration turns into cold indifference. The empath is left completely confused. What did I do wrong? Why did everything change so fast? This is when the hunger sets in. You long for the love you felt at the start, for that early warmth. But the harder you chase it, the further away it gets pushed. This is the narcissist's cruel game, giving you just enough sweetness to keep you craving more, but never enough to actually satisfy you. Then comes the campaign to break your spirit. What makes this stage so brutal is that the narcissist isn't satisfied just hurting you. They want you to lose your sense of self entirely. They twist your kindness into a flaw and your sensitivity into a weakness. If you won't lie, they'll pressure you relentlessly until you crack, and then mock you for finally becoming just like them. If you hold on to your kindness anyway, they'll belittle it and tell you it doesn't matter or help anyone. Their real goal is to strip away who you truly are and reshape you into a dimmer version of themselves, so they no longer have to face the stark difference between your light and their darkness. When you refuse to be molded, the punishment follows. Cold silence that makes you question your own worth, public put-downs meant to embarrass you, or sharp little comments aimed straight at your deepest insecurities. This is emotional abuse at its most subtle, drawn out, draining, and carefully designed to make you believe you don't deserve real love. And this is where the most dangerous temptation shows up. Faced with this kind of relentless pain, many empaths feel a strong pull to simply shut their hearts down for good. They think if they just become cold and unfeeling, like the narcissists themselves, then nobody will ever be able to hurt them again. But this is actually the final trap. If you let yourself freeze over just to escape the pain, the narcissist still wins. They haven't just broken your spirit, they've pushed you into betraying who you really are. The truth is that this spiritual starvation isn't the end of your story. It's a refining fire. It strips away every illusion, forces you to confront your deepest fear of being abandoned, and pushes you right up to the edge of despair. And yet, right there in that deep darkness, the very first spark of real awakening begins to appear. You start to understand that no matter how much you keep giving, you can't fill a container that has no bottom. You realize you can't heal someone who is determined to tear you down. And from that painful realization, the chains slowly start to loosen. You stop chasing approval from the exact person causing your pain. You start turning inward instead, listening to that quiet voice inside your own soul that gently says, "You are worthy simply because you exist." This difficult trial is what prepares you for the third stage, where the fog finally clears and you step out of the shadows into real clarity. They believe that if they just stop loving and stop caring, the pain will finally stop. And for a brief moment, that numbness might feel like protection. But over time, it quietly destroys the soul, because empaths were never meant to feel nothing. When you shut down compassion, you're shutting down the very core of who you are. That's exactly why stage 2 becomes a real trial by fire. Just like metal only becomes strong after being forged in flame, empaths have to go through this stage to learn how to keep their hearts open while still protecting themselves with wisdom and boundaries. The pain in this stage is what determines whether you break completely or get forged into something stronger. Then there's the quiet whisper of hope. During those long, lonely nights full of doubt, there's still a small but steady voice inside the empath's heart. Don't give up. Don't let them take away who you are. That voice might be faith, it might be intuition, or it might just be the last flicker of hope refusing to die out. Whatever it is, it's what keeps the empath from being swallowed completely by darkness. It's what allows them to stay grounded even when everything else feels like it's shaking. Empaths don't get through this stage by fighting back aggressively or trying to prove a point to the narcissist. They survive by holding tightly to their core values, love, honesty, kindness, while also learning that those values need to be protected by wisdom and clear boundaries. So what does this second stage really mean? It's without a doubt the most painful part of the empath's journey. It feels like an endless desert where the soul is pushed to its absolute limit. And yet it's exactly in that desert where real strength is born. Because when you learn how to keep your heart open without hardening it into bitterness, but also without leaving it exposed to be taken advantage of, that's when true awakening begins. This stage isn't meant to break you. It's meant to teach you something important. Compassion needs to be balanced with wisdom, and love needs to be balanced with boundaries. Once you've made it through this fire, you'll never be as easy to manipulate again. Stage 2, this spiritual starvation, is where empaths go through the deepest suffering. But it's also exactly where unbreakable strength gets built. It's the darkest point of the night right before dawn breaks. And only by making it through this stage can you move forward into stage 3, where awakening and boundaries begin to completely reshape your life. Stage 3 is where awakening happens and boundaries get set. This is when the empath finally learns to stand their ground. If stage 2 was the barren desert where the soul was tested to its absolute limit through starvation, then stage 3 is the real turning point, the awakening itself. It isn't some dramatic explosion or a big theatrical moment of revenge. It's more like a quiet click inside the mind, a sudden flash of clarity. The empath suddenly understands, I've gone too far sacrificing myself just to hold on to relationships that were never actually worth it. This moment of realization tends to arrive when you least expect it. For years, maybe you believed that if you just loved a little more, stayed a little more patient, compromised a little more, the other person would eventually change and finally give you what you needed. But then one day, the truth quietly reveals itself. It was never about you not being enough. It was that they simply never had the capacity to love you the way you deserved. They never really wanted to listen, never wanted to understand you, and never intended to respect your worth in the first place. This is what awakening actually looks like. It's not that you suddenly became harder or colder, it's that you became exhausted. Tired of explaining yourself to people who never wanted to understand in the first place. Tired of trying to please people who only paid attention to you when you stayed small, but ignored or attacked you the moment you started to shine. That exhaustion is exactly the fire that wakes you up. I can't keep living like this. Then comes the power of saying no. At this stage, the empath starts learning a skill they used to avoid completely: saying no. Because that no isn't selfish at all, it's actually a statement of survival for your own soul. It might be as small as turning down a pointless meeting, walking away from a toxic conversation, or refusing to keep carrying the weight of a relationship that only goes one way. But for an empath, every single no feels like a small revolution. You start realizing that no one has the right to demand you empty yourself just to prove you love them. You stop feeling obligated to smile while your heart is quietly breaking inside. You no longer feel the need to play the role of the good one for people who only use kindness against you. Instead, you start choosing carefully, opening your heart only to the people who actually value it, giving only where it's genuinely deserved, and keeping only the connections that actually nourish your soul. This awakening doesn't stop with just changing your behavior. It reshapes the way you see the entire world. You find yourself feeling uneasy in shallow conversations and empty social connections. You start craving depth, honesty, and real connection instead. You start turning toward nature, where silence itself becomes a kind of medicine. You rediscover joy in quiet mornings, in birdsong, in sunlight filtering through the leaves, small things you used to overlook while you were chasing everyone else's approval. Your entire mindset begins to shift too. Instead of trying to control every outcome, you start trusting the timing of life or the guidance of something greater than yourself. You begin noticing the patterns that keep repeating in your life, the same lessons showing up again and again until you finally learn what you were meant to learn. And once you see that clearly, the constant urge to please everyone starts fading away, replaced instead by a desire to protect your own inner peace. Boundaries become like an invisible but unbreakable wall. The real signature of this stage is learning how to build boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls that shut the world out completely. They're more like fences that protect the garden of your soul. You're not closing off your heart, but you're also no longer letting just anyone walk into it. You come to understand that real love never asks you to sacrifice your own dignity, and true kindness never requires you to make yourself smaller. Once boundaries are in place, you start to feel lighter. The things that used to drain you completely no longer hold the same power over you. The emotional triggers the narcissist use to push so easily just stop working. They try using silence to punish you, but you find peace in that quiet instead. They try to provoke you, but you respond with calm. They try to damage your reputation, but you no longer feel the need to defend or prove anything. That's the real power of boundaries. Quiet, but completely unshakable. This is also where you begin to taste a whole new kind of freedom. Not because the narcissists disappear from your life, but because they no longer have any power over you anymore. Freedom in this sense doesn't mean isolation, it means discernment. The ability to choose exactly who gets access to your inner world. And that's when you realize just how much you've grown through everything you've been through. You start to treasure the rare relationships where you never have to shrink yourself to be accepted. You find genuine joy in simplicity. You might even discover that a loyal dog or a peaceful sunset brings you more comfort than dozens of shallow relationships ever could. From this point forward, you start living in truth and only in truth. So what does stage 3 really mean for you? It marks the shift from being a victim to becoming truly awakened. You're no longer driven by a hunger for approval. You're no longer sacrificing yourself to hold on to people who were never worthy of that sacrifice. You start living with integrity, guided by the power of no, and by an inner peace you've never fully experienced before. And as your boundaries grow stronger and your awakening deepens, you've already stepped one foot into stage 4, where the empath fully becomes their awakened, unbreakable self. But remember, it all starts with the simple decision to stay quiet, to say no, and to protect yourself. Stage 4 is when the empath becomes fully awakened. This is when the narcissist loses all their power completely. If stage 2 was the depth of suffering and stage 3 was the bell that rang in awakening, then stage 4 is the very summit of the whole journey, complete awakening. This is the point where the empath, after years of trials, refining, and rebirth, finally becomes the unshakable version of themselves. A version that still carries compassion, but now paired with real wisdom and firm, steady boundaries. And this is exactly what the narcissist fears the most. They can no longer control you, manipulate you, or reach you at all. This is the empath after the storm. By the time you arrive at this stage, you've already witnessed every trick, every mask, every toxic cycle a narcissist can come up with. You've lived through the sweet idealization, followed by the sudden devaluation. You've endured the punishing silence, the quiet insults, and the attempts to break down your self-worth. But instead of letting it destroy you, you turned every bit of it into a lesson. Now, when the narcissist tries their old tricks, you simply smile, because you've already seen this play before, and it doesn't work on you anymore. You've become a mirror of truth, but you no longer suffer for playing that role. Instead of feeling wounded by their jealousy, you understand that their reactions have nothing to do with your worth. They only reveal how empty they really are. You no longer wait for their understanding, and you no longer chase their approval.